Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1478A, and today's date is January 22nd, 2018, and the title of the episode is Everything Has Put into Place to Slow the Collapse to Prepare for the Transition. Let's get into the economic collapse financial news. Now, it looks like the shutdown of the government has ended, and we knew it was going to end. They were going to keep the government shut down. They were going to borrow more money. They were going to continue on with everything. And this is how it's been throughout the past. They've never kept the government shut down for a long period of time. They always come together because they don't want the money to stop flowing into their pockets. And everyone thinks, well, they're doing it for the benefit of the people, but they really aren't. Now, what's very interesting about all of this, and I'm going to explain why Trump is taking responsibility for the economy, even though the corporate media is out there, the economists saying, yes, it is his economy, why he's pointing to the stock market and saying, look how great it's doing, look how great I made the economy, because he is using their methods on them. Think about what they've done in the past, where they pushed the market up to all-time highs, then they brought it down. He's doing the same exact thing, but he's going to do the old switcheroo later on, and I'll be discussing that. But what I want to talk about here is what he's doing right now. And it's not just him. It's not just Trump. It's many different patriots behind him, working with him, trying to get rid of those individuals that were trying to basically bring down the U.S. to a level that we would not be able to survive. And what they're doing right now is they need time. They need time, and they need to maneuver to bring it down in the way they want to bring it down. Now, the central banks, they want the system to come down in their manner, and that usually has to do with some type of an event, or if there was a new party coming in, Republicans, Democrat, they can blame it on the old party. But this time it's a little different, because when Trump came in, he wasn't really part of the Republican, he wasn't really part of the Democrats, and they were shocked that he actually won. And the economy at that point in time, well, it wasn't ready, and everything wasn't in place for them to do this, and it would be a complete and utter disaster. And they've been holding off, and I'm talking about the central banks, they've been holding off, hoping that Trump would take responsibility for the economy. They would pump it up, and they're continually pumping it up. It has nothing to do with Trump. It's actually the manipulation that the central banks are doing right now. And they're pumping it up to a point where they can blame it on him. And we're going to see articles come out of the corporate media saying that, the economy might be turning downward. We're seeing signs of it and all this stuff. But we know the economy is doing terribly right now. And the only thing that everyone is looking at is the stock market. Now, what's very interesting is that Trump came out with his new tax bill, and everyone's applauding and everything like that. And yes, funds will come back from corporations that have been pushed overseas and will be coming back to the United States. The tax bill will still add $500 billion to $1 trillion to the deficit over the coming decade. In fact, those estimates are probably understate the final cost, since Congress is likely to extend provisions to sunset in order to meet Senate budget rules. If the president and Congress come up with an infrastructure bill, even more red ink will flow. Now, the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget predicts deficits of about $1.05 trillion and $1.1 trillion in 2019 and 2020. Now, the thing that's happening here is that he's slowing down everything, where they have time to prepare us for a transition into the new system. And what we're seeing is that the IMF, the central banks, they're saying, yes, growth looks a lot better right now. They're saying growth will continue on, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But I wanted to talk about the strange anomalies that are in the market, and this is how you can tell that things are really manipulated. Over the past week, we've highlighted several market indicators, which, and many others, have found surprising, concerning about the euphoric risk rally in the new year. And we can see that it has reached all-time record highs without a 5% correction and very low pairwise correlations within equity indices. Now, we can add one more of these strange things that are happening because we are seeing a odd cross-asset price action. According to the cross-asset strategist Jeremy Hale, he writes that the S&P 500 has rallied to new highs. Credit spreads have widened slightly over the tights. And what we're seeing right now is something that is very, very strange. We also see that the U.S. equity market has never done this before, which we're going to mention in a second. The S&P 500 is trading at a price-to-sales ratio of 2.35 times, which is a new record for high valuation. The S&P 500 is up 8 of the last 9 weeks, 16 of the last 19 weeks, and 15 of the last 15 months, and 22 of the last 23 months. This has pushed the S&P 500 to an RSI of 88.4, a new record high for overbought stocks. Now, what we're seeing here is that the S&P 500 has had 395 days without a 5% setback. This is the longest we've ever seen this before. The last time we've seen numbers like this was back in the 60s, around 1965, which was about 386 days. Back in 96, 97, that was 394 days, and both of these led into a recession. The same thing is happening right now. All of this is looking very odd and strange. And we know that the entire stock market has been manipulated by the central bank. Now, the IMF came out and it raised its global GDP outlook to the highest in 7 years. And they're saying thanks to Trump's tax cuts, and the IMF raised its forecast world expansion to about 3.9% in 2018 and 2019, up by 0.2%. And of course, the UK, they're looking at that country saying, yeah, they're not going to do as well because they're trying to leave the central bank system. Now, we need to understand what the IMF is saying. The IMF is saying that risks to global growth forecasts appear broadly balanced in the near term, but remain skewed to the downside over the medium term. The current cyclical upswings provides an ideal opportunity for reforms. Shared priorities across all economies include implementing structural reform to boost potential output and making growth more inclusive. However, the improved growth momentum means that fiscal policy should increasingly be designed with an eye on medium-term goals, ensuring fiscal sustainability and bolstering potential output. Multilateral cooperation remains vital for securing the global recovery. And we need to understand what is happening here. The central banks, and we've said this many times before, central banks don't want to crash systems. They want the balance. They want to put countries into debt and maintain the balance, and they want austerity. They want cuts in certain areas. Trump right now is cutting many different areas, cutting different programs. Central banks like this. They see this as, ooh, this is a good thing. We can keep issuing debt, and they'll cut more. Look at Greece, look at Cyprus, look at many other countries where they had to push austerity on the people, where they had to cut certain items, and the central banks were very happy with this because it allowed them to take more debt on. This is what is happening right now. The central banks see it as a good thing. Trump and those in government are setting them up. How are they setting them up? Well, we can see what is happening here. Normally in the past, the central banks and the cabal, they would push the markets up, they would crash them, we'd need new laws, we'd have to borrow more money, and this went on and on and on. Today, what we're seeing is he's putting forth this tax bill to bring a lot of the currency back from overseas back into this country, to give this country time to transition into the new system. He's taking credit for the stock market going up, for the economy, because his hopes and those behind him are hoping that they can take this and blame it on the central bank when the whole thing comes down. Because he's going to say he's been pushing the economy. He's been doing whatever he has to do. He's bringing jobs back. He's bringing currency back. And he's built the economy up. And what they're going to try to do is they're going to try to have the system come down and blame it on the central bank. Meanwhile, the central bank, they're doing the same thing, trying to bring it down and blame it on him. Now, we know there's another battle going on because we have multiple battles happening all at the same time. Remember, the central bank, the cabal, been around for a very long time. They've had a long time to set their system up. They've had a long time to control everything. And those behind Trump are using this to their advantage. It's weird how the corporate media is out there and they don't like to say, well, it's because of Trump. That's why the stock market going up. The economy is doing a lot better because of Trump. They kind of stay away from all of that because they don't want to get involved in the positive part of what Trump is doing here. Now, it's not really positive. He's using everything that they've used in the past and he's using it on them. He's going to bring up the system like he's doing right now, pump it up, in the meanwhile, in the background, prepare the country for a transition. Blame it on the central bank, say this was their economy, they run the economy, and I was helping the economy out, and they crashed it. And then he can say, they just didn't crash it here in the United States, from everything they've done in the past, globally, they destroyed the entire system. This is why we're transitioning into this new system. And this is one method that he is using right now to do this. Now, Russia and China, they're continually accumulating gold. They're pushing their agenda to take over the system. Russia, the central bank, has added about 300,000 ounces, 9.3 tons of gold to its reserves in December, bringing the total up to about 223 tons in 2017. And since June of 2015, the Central Bank of Russia has added around 558 tons of gold. And they're continually doing this because gold is a confidence builder. When systems come down, people look to it and say, okay, you have the gold, you have the real money, we trust you. This is why during Bretton Woods, back right after World War II, all the gold came to the United States. But of course, the infrastructure in Europe was absolutely in shambles, and there was only one place to bring the gold, and that was the United States. Now, China and Russia have all the gold, and they're going to use it as a confidence builder for the new system. They might not back the currency with gold. You don't have to, because they're going to use oil to do this. And this might be a high-level currency that countries trade, and cryptos might be a lower level that people use every single day. And this is the way they might do this. Now, we also need to understand is that in Russia, Putin has taken control of the central bank. He calls the shot. It's still a private Western central bank, but he tells the central bank what to do. China, well, they still have the private Western central bank in China. And we still have it here in the United States. Now, we know that Trump has Andrew Jackson hanging on the wall, which is a signal that he's going to be going after the central bank system, the private Western central bank system, to get rid of it. And what we can see, which might happen later on, where Russia, the United States, and China, they turn on the private Western central bank and they get rid of it once and for all. And this might happen because what's very interesting about all of this is that Putin has control of his central bank. Andrew Jackson is hanging on the wall behind Trump in his office. He also has gold curtains. The $100 bill was redesigned. One side is a Federal Reserve note. The other side is gold. And it doesn't say Federal Reserve note. It says the United States. So we can see that this is going to be the ultimate plan as we move forward. We know China is setting up the One Belt, One Road system. Russia is on board. Many of the countries in Asia are on board. We understand that Europe is going to be on board. We see that Europe is moving closer and closer to Russia right now, moving away from the cabal where they've been using Russia as, the boogeyman. And we see right now the United States will eventually have to join this. And the only way for this entire system to work properly is to get rid of the central bank, because eventually, if you have the central bank, they will do the same exact thing they've done over the many years. Now, we can see already that the corporate media has already started to push their propaganda about the economy not doing too well. And we see one of the articles that are coming out, and this is coming from San Francisco CBS Local, where it says Economic Planning, 5 Ways to Prepare for a Downturn. Now, which is very interesting because the IMF just came out and said how great everything's going to be. Everything's going to be growing. Of course, their estimates are always wrong. They always revise their numbers later on to say, oop, sorry about that. It's much, much lower. Usually it's in half of what they told us. And we see already that with the stock market going up, with the corporate media in the past saying how great the economy was because it was the Obama economy. Now they're starting to put out these different articles telling you different ways to prepare for a downturn. And this is saying that, there's 5 different ways. 1, take money even if you don't need it. Take a loan, take whatever you need, keep money and make sure you have it. And we also see there's other information about if you own a business, what you need to do if there's a downturn. And we're going to see a lot more of these articles come out because what is happening right now is we have the central bank. They're ready to push their agenda. We have the Patriots behind Trump getting ready to push their agenda. And it's going to be a race to see who controls the narrative of the story in the end. But one thing is true, is that we're going to be going through a transition. Remember, central banks, they don't care how the transition works. They don't care if it's hard, soft. They don't care if it hurts people. They don't care if they bankrupt people. And I think the Patriots, with Trump, they're looking to kind of soften the landing a little bit. It's still going to be a little difficult. It's going to still be hard because we'll be moving into a completely new system compared to 1971, where we came off the gold standard when we were still the reserve currency of the world, and we moved into the petrodollar system, and we were still the reserve currency of the world. We were just moving on to a different system, but we were still the reserve currency. And you can see during that transition period, people lost jobs in the beginning. People couldn't get fuel. People couldn't get certain supplies during that period of time. And interest rates were very high. And all of a sudden, back then in the 80s, things started to even out and things got better. And as time went on, things went a little bit better. And now, starting in the mid-90s, late 90s, in the 2000s, things started to fall apart rapidly because the system had reached a point where it cannot be sustained anymore, and it continually declines. Now, we're coming up to a certain period of time where we're on the back end. I mean, think about it. We were coming off the gold standard, moving into a petrodollar reserve currency, and we couldn't get fuel. We couldn't get certain supplies at the market. People couldn't find jobs at this time. And now we're going off of this petrodollar system onto a completely different reserve currency, which is out of our hands, out of the United States. This is going to be a very hard transition. And this is why the Trump administration, the Patriots there, are trying to smooth this out, give us a little bit of time to prepare for this. Remember, he's had 1 year to be in office, compared to the central bank, the cabal, who's been in there for many, many, many years, because their agenda was to crash this system hard and bring this entire thing into a one world government type of society. And now everything is changing. So get ready, get prepared, because we're going to be going through it, and we're going to have to see if this is going to be hard or soft. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.